What happens when a powerful pastor with hidden secrets encounters a desperate woman with nothing to lose? Will the truth set them free or destroy everything? Grab your popcorn as we delve into this shocking true life story. In a bustling city in Nigeria, Pastor John was a revered figure. He led a popular church, drawing crowds from far and wide every Sunday. The church was always packed, with people even standing outside to catch a glimpse of him. Pastor John's voice was commanding, and his words seemed to touch every heart. Many believed he had a special connection with God. He prayed for the sick, helped the poor, and blessed couples on their wedding day. However, behind closed doors, Pastor John was not the holy man people thought he was. He harbored dark secrets known only to a few. One evening, after a midweek service, Pastor John sat in his opulent office, the air filled with the scent of expensive perfume. A young church worker knocked timidly and entered. "Pastor, the elders want to see you," the young man said, bowing slightly. Pastor John looked up, his smile warm but his eyes cold. "Tell them I'll join them soon," he replied calmly. Once the young man left, Pastor John leaned back in his chair. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "God is watching you. Change your ways before it's too late." Pastor John stared at the message for a moment, then smiled to himself, deleted it, and returned to his work. Amaka was a young woman with big dreams. She had recently become Pastor John's personal assistant. To many, it seemed like a blessing to work for such a powerful man. But for Amaka, it was a means of survival. Her mother was ill and required constant care, and Amaka had to send money home every month. Finding this job felt like a miracle, but she also had a secret. Amaka was HIV positive, a fact she kept even from her closest friends. On her first day at work, Amaka dressed neatly in a plain pink shirt and a blue skirt. She knocked softly on Pastor John's office door. "Come in," his deep voice called out. Amaka entered, her hands slightly trembling. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, forcing a smile. Pastor John looked up and smiled warmly. "Ah, you must be Amaka," he said, standing to shake her hand. "Welcome to the team. I've heard good things about you." "Thank you, sir," Amaka replied, her voice steady but her heart pounding. Pastor John gestured for her to sit. "This job will demand a lot from you," he began. "I need someone who is loyal, hardworking, and ready to sacrifice for the work of God. Are you ready for that?" "Yes, sir, I am ready," Amaka said confidently. "Good," Pastor John said, his smile widening. "Here we are like a family. We protect each other, we trust each other. If you have any issues, feel free to come to me directly. Okay?" "Yes, sir, thank you, sir," Amaka said, nodding, as she left his office. Amaka couldn't shake the uneasy feeling she had. Something about Pastor John's smile didn't sit right with her. It was too perfect, too polished, like a mask hiding something underneath. Amaka told herself to focus on the job. She needed the money, and that was all that mattered. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the small voice in her head warning her that this job might cost her more than she was ready to give. Amaka had been working as Pastor John's assistant for 2 weeks, and everything seemed fine at first. She quickly learned her duties, scheduling meetings, replying to messages, and organizing church events. It was a busy job, but Amaka was determined to do her best. "Amaka, you're doing well," Pastor John said one afternoon as she handed him a file. "Very smart and hardworking. I wish all my staff were like you." "Thank you, sir," Amaka replied, smiling politely. But as the days went by, Amaka began to notice things that didn't feel right. Pastor John complimented her too much. "You look beautiful today," he said one morning when she walked into the office. "That color suits you. I can see you have good taste." "Thank you, sir," Amaka said, though she felt uncomfortable. She wasn't sure if he was just being kind or if there was more to it. One evening, as Amaka was about to leave for the day, Pastor John called her back into his office. "Amaka," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I want us to talk." Amaka sat down slowly, her heart beating a little faster. "Yes, sir. You've been doing an amazing job," Pastor John began, leaning forward, You are different. There's something special about you. Thank you, sir, Amaka said, looking down at her hands. Pastor John continued. You know, people like you are rare. You're not just hardworking. You're also very beautiful. Do people tell you that often? Amaka shifted in her seat. I don't really think about that, sir. I just try to do my work. Pastor John smiled, but his eyes lingered on her in a way that made her skin crawl. That's good, but you should know your worth. A woman like you deserves to be appreciated. Thank you, sir, Amaka said quickly, standing up. I'll finish the work you gave me before tomorrow. She turned to leave, but Pastor John stopped her. Wait, Amaka, don't rush off. We're just talking. I hope you feel comfortable around me. You know you can trust me, right? Yes, sir, she said, forcing a smile. As Amaka left the office, she felt a strange mix of emotions. She didn't like how Pastor John was talking to her, but she also didn't want to lose her job. She needed the money to take care of her sick mother. That night, Amaka couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Pastor John's words in her head. You're very beautiful. You deserve to be appreciated. Why is he saying these things, she wondered. Is this how he talks to everyone? Or is it just me? Amaka decided to ignore it and focus on her work. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. Pastor John's behavior was only the beginning, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming next. Amaka sat at her desk, going through files and making sure Pastor John's schedule for the week was organized. It was a quiet afternoon until the intercom buzzed. Amaka, please come to my office. Pastor John's deep voice said. Yes, sir, she replied, gathering her notebook and pen. She walked to his office and knocked lightly before stepping inside. Come in, Amaka, sit down, Pastor John said with a smile, motioning to the chair across from him. Amaka sat down, her notebook in hand, ready to take notes. But Pastor John didn't speak about work. Instead, he leaned forward and said, Amaka, you know you're special, don't you? She frowned slightly, unsure of where the conversation was going. Thank you, sir, she said cautiously. No, I mean it. Pastor John continued, reaching out to hold her hand. You are not just hardworking. You're beautiful, graceful. You have something many women don't have. Amaka quickly pulled her hand away, feeling a knot in her stomach. Sir, I think we should focus on the work, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Pastor John's smile softened, leaning back in his chair. Amaka, don't be so uptight. You know, in life, there are opportunities that come only once. You're in a position many people would do anything to have. Anything? Amaka didn't like the tone in his voice. Sir, I'm just here to do my job, she said firmly. Pastor John's smile faded slightly. Amaka, let me be clear with you. There are many beautiful ladies out there who are ready to do anything to take your position. If you want to keep your job, you should think about how to be flexible. Amaka felt her heart drop. Sir, I don't understand what you mean, she said, though deep down, she knew exactly what he was saying. Pastor John gave a short laugh, his eyes cold. You're smart, Amaka. I'm sure you do. She stood up quickly. Sir, if there's nothing else, I'd like to get back to work. Pastor John's smile was gone now. He waved her off dismissively. Go, but think about what I said. Don't make me regret giving you this opportunity. Amaka walked out of the office, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't give in to his demands, but she also knew how much she needed this job. A week later, she came to work as usual, only to find a letter waiting for her on her desk. It was short and cold. This is to inform you that your services are no longer required. Please return all company property immediately. Amaka's hand shook as she read the letter. She went to Pastor John's office to ask for an explanation, but his personal guard stopped her. He's busy, the guard said. Amaka left the church that day with her belongings in a small box, tears filling her eyes as she walked down the road. She thought about her sick mother back in the village and how she would manage without a job. For weeks, Amaka searched for another job, but nothing came up. She felt trapped, angry, and helpless. Deep inside, She knew that Pastor John had fired her because she refused to play along with his games. It was a dark time for Amaka, but she promised herself one thing. She wouldn't give up. What she didn't know was that her story with Pastor John was far from over. Weeks turned into months, and Amaka's life became harder every day. Her rent was due, and her mother's medical bills kept coming. She sat on her small bed, staring at her last few currency notes, wondering how she would buy food. Her phone vibrated, showing a low battery warning. She sighed, scrolling through her contacts, thinking of anyone she could call for help. There was no one. She thought of Pastor John and how he had fired her without mercy. Her anger boiled, but so did her desperation. The next morning, she put on her best dress and went to the church office. She was ready to swallow her pride. She waited in the reception area, her hands shaking. Finally, Pastor John stepped out of his office. He stopped when he saw her, raising an eyebrow. "Amaka," he said, "what are you doing here?" "Good afternoon, sir," Amaka said, standing up. "I need to talk to you." Pastor John looked around, then motioned for her to follow him into his office. He sat down, leaning back in his chair. "I didn't expect to see you again. What do you want?" "Sir, I'm sorry for anything I might have done wrong. I really need my job back. Things are very hard for me," she said, her voice breaking. Pastor John smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "You see, Amaka, I gave you a good opportunity, but you didn't appreciate it. Do you know how many women would love to work for me?" "I understand, sir," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please, sir, I'll do anything." His eyes lit up at those words. "Anything you say?" he asked, leaning forward. Amaka nodded, her throat dry. She knew what he meant. "All right," Pastor John said, his tone soft. "You can have your job back, but you must promise to show me respect. No more acting like you're better than me. Do you agree?" "Yes, sir," she said, forcing herself to look him in the eye. "Good," he said, standing up. "Come back on Monday. And remember, Amaka, loyalty is everything." Amaka left his office, her heart pounding. She hated herself for agreeing to his terms, but she had no choice. This time, she told herself, she would be smart. She would keep records of everything. It started with a phone call from Pastor John one evening after church. "Amaka," he said, his voice smooth, "I need to see you. Not at the office, somewhere private." "Where, sir?" she asked, pretending not to understand. "I'll book a hotel room this evening," he said. "I'll text you the details." Her stomach turned, but she agreed. She needed to follow through with her plan. The first meeting was awkward. Amaka sat on the edge of the hotel bed, watching Pastor John remove his tie. "You look tense," he said, sitting beside her. "I'm fine, sir," she replied, forcing a smile. "You don't need to call me sir here," he said, placing a hand on her knee. "Relax." She nodded, swallowing her disgust. She reminded herself why she was doing this. Over the weeks, their meetings became a routine. After church services, Pastor John would call her and ask her to meet him at a hotel room. He would hand her envelopes of cash, saying, "Use this for your mother's treatment." But what shocked Amaka the most was his carelessness. He never asked for protection. "I'm a servant of God," he would say with pride. "God protects his own." Amaka wanted to laugh at his words, but she stayed quiet. She recorded their conversations on her phone, hiding the files in a secret folder. She also saved every text message he sent. At night, when she was alone, she would cry. She hated what she was doing, but her anger kept her going. "He started this," she whispered to herself. "I'll make him pay for everything." Grace, Pastor John's wife, sat in the living room one evening, watching her husband scroll endlessly on his phone. He had been doing that a lot lately. "John, you've been on that phone all day," she said, trying to sound casual. "I'm replying to church messages," he replied without looking up. Grace studied him. Something about his tone felt off. She had been noticing little changes, how he stayed out late after church, his sudden increase in meetings, and the way he avoided her questions. That evening, she decided to do something about it. The next day, Grace called Amaka into her office at the church. "Amaka, sit down," she said, folding her arms across her chest. Amaka hesitated but sat. "Good morning, Ma." Grace leaned forward. "Amaka, I'm a woman, and I know when something is not right. There's something going on between you and my husband, isn't there?" Amaka's heart skipped. "Ma, I don't understand what you're talking about," she said, keeping her voice steady. Grace smirked. "I see the way he looks at you, and I've noticed how uncomfortable you look around me. Let me warn you now, Amaka. If you're doing anything you shouldn't be doing, it will not end well for you." Amaka shook her head quickly. "Ma, I respect you and Pastor John. I would never do anything to disrespect this family." Grace's eyes stayed fixed on her. "I hope so, Amaka. Be careful." As Amaka walked out of the office, her hands trembled. She could feel the walls closing in. Grace didn't believe Amaka's denial. She had trusted her instincts for years, and they had never failed her. That evening, she called her friend, Sister Joy, for advice. "Joy, I need your help. Something is going on with John, and I need to know the truth," Grace said. "Grace, you need evidence before you confront him. Have you thought about hiring someone?" Joy replied. The idea lingered in Grace's mind. The next morning, she made a call to a private investigator. 2 weeks later, Grace received a phone call from the investigator. "Madam, I followed Pastor John to a hotel yesterday. He wasn't alone," the man said. Grace gripped her phone tightly. "Who was he with?" "The young lady that works as his assistant," he replied. The investigator sent Grace pictures. Clear evidence of Pastor John entering the hotel with Amaka. Grace stared at the pictures that night, her emotions a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. "So it's true," she whispered to herself, but she didn't act immediately. Instead, she decided to wait. She wanted the perfect moment to confront both of them. "John, you think you're smart," she murmured, clutching the photos. "Let's see how smart you are when I'm done with you." Grace's plan was set, and the storm was coming. Pastor John sat in his office one evening, looking at the mirror. He looked pale and tired. He had lost so much weight that even his favorite clothes no longer fit properly. He leaned back in his chair and sighed heavily. Amaka walked in with some documents for him to sign. "Good evening, sir," she said, avoiding his eyes. "Leave them on the table," Pastor John said weakly, his voice rough. Amaka placed the papers down and hesitated. She could see the pain on his face and the way his hands trembled. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked quietly. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Why do you care? You just want your salary at the end of the month, don't you?" Amaka stepped back, shocked. "No, sir, I was only asking." He waved her off. "Go." As she left, Amaka couldn't shake off the guilt that had been building inside her. Pastor John's health was clearly failing, and while she didn't know the full reason, she suspected it was linked to their secret meetings. Later that night, as Amaka lay on her bed, her thoughts were racing. "What if it's because of me? What if I've caused this?" she whispered to herself. But then she remembered how he had treated her, how he had forced her into the situation. "He did this to himself," she muttered, trying to convince herself. But deep down, the guilt lingered. It was a bright Sunday morning, and the church was filled with people for a special meeting with the elders. Pastor John sat at the head of the table, trying to look composed despite his failing health. Amaka stood at the back of the room, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Grace suddenly burst into the room, her face filled with anger. "Excuse me, elders, but I have something important to show you," she said loudly. The room fell silent. Pastor John's face went pale as he shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Grace, what are you doing?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Grace ignored him and handed a brown envelope to the head elder. "These are pictures of my husband, Pastor John, with this girl," she said, pointing at Amaka. Amaka froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The head elder opened the envelope and pulled out the photos. Shouts and murmurs filled the room as the elders looked at the pictures of Pastor John and Amaka entering and leaving a hotel. "Pastor John, what is this?" One of the elders asked, his voice serious. It's not what